Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs, chers amis. Good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a chat. The Nights of Reading, or les Nuits de la Lecture, was created by France's Ministry of Culture way back in 2017 to celebrate the joy of reading in all its forms that has met with great success these past 4 years. The theme of this year's 5th edition is Rereading the World, which invites you all to reinvent and engage the world, to travel immobile, allowing one to discover new horizons and to dream of other adventures while reading, thanks to reading. Our guest today is Mr. Ashok Ferrey, one of Sri Lanka's well-known authors. Interestingly, he read pure mathematics at Oxford. Before becoming a writer, he was also a builder in London. And may I also add that he is a personal trainer by day, Ashok Ferrey. Ashok, as a Sri Lankan Anglophone, what would have been your exposure to French literature?
Actually, Kumar, a surprising lot. You don't imagine that there is so much French literature squeezed into English literature, because we read everything in translation. But even from a young age, there's a book called Le Petit Prince by Antoine. I don't know whether even the French read it, but the English all read
They
that.
do. It's Little Boys' Bible.
Little Boys,
Yeah,
exactly. You know,
It
sort of
is.
starting with that. And at school, there was a book called Bonjour Tristesse by Française, which we all read at school in French and then in translation.
Yes.
So like that, throughout the years, a lot, much more than we imagine.
So, est-ce que vous parlez français, monsieur? You speak English?
Un petit peu, really. The thing is, I've done various exams in French and done okay in them, but I grew up in a boarding school in England where the practical spoken part, the English are really bad with their accents, so the spoken part is always very minimal, and it's the written. But having said that, my two close friends at school were half French, and then later on I had a Mauritian girlfriend, and so
She spoke English.
actually she spoke a lot of French, you know. So
how did you communicate?
I mean, she
parlez
spoke
un peu de
English.
français?
No. She spoke English also, but there was a lot of times when she'd slip into French.
So you've read mainly the English translations of French books?
Mainly the English, a few exceptional books I've struggled through in the French, but mainly in English. Yeah.
So you as a writer, what kind of French influences have there been in your writing in English?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I started writing very late in life. At the age of 42, I wrote my first book. So for those first 30, 40 years when I was reading, I read books as a reader, and now I read books as a writer. It's quite different.
That's a question later on.
Okay.
But French influences on your writing?
This man. And I had no idea that he had so much influence on me till I reread this book for the third time about 6 months ago or whatever. I mean, it's such a simple book, and yet the meaning of the book doesn't lie close to the surface, and I think that's what I like about it. I have anyway a love of mid-century modern writers like Graham Greene, Muriel Spark, Evelyn Waugh, and this guy is in there very much. You know, the characters do one thing, the meaning is doing something else, you know? And it's quite different from the French writers of the 19th century that I grew up with, Maupassant, Balzac, etc., where the meaning lies very close to the surface, whereas here the meaning lies much further down.
So how much of that has come into your writing? You've been influenced by what you've read.
Interestingly, a huge amount. I mean, I had no idea till I reread that book for the third time. In my world, the world that I describe in my books, the world is quite mad. And I am this character, essentially this outsider wandering through this very absurd world. And people find my books very funny. But actually, I'm not trying to be funny, because it's the world as I see it.
You are not trying to be funny.
No, never. It's the world as I see it. When I wrote that first book, Called Pretty People, and got published.
It was hilarious.
Well, people came up and said, "Oh, it's really funny," and I thought,
exactly. I thought so too.
It's not funny. It's serious. It was serious. So it's that same thing. It's an absurd world that I see, but to me, it's very serious. And there's this character always trying to navigate through this very absurd world and not really making so much sense of it. Do you know? So he has to come to terms with this really weird world he sees. For me, Sri Lanka is one divine comedy, you know.
It's a madhouse. Now, going by what you said, so do you think that you as a writer that you are misunderstood? Now, copy to people, we thought
misunderstood in one way, but it's also very
in
flattering.
a nice way.
It's very flattering also, because any book, for it to be successful, has to have 2, 3, 4, 5 layers. So you can read Call Petty People for the humor when you're young. If you read it 10 years later, you will get something else from it. If you read it another 10 years later, hopefully you get something else, which is, for me, what happens with L'étranger. As I said, I read it recently and I saw something a whole lot different from what I saw 20 years ago and then 30 years ago when I first read it.
Okay. Now, translations, how much of the original essence of a story is lost in translation? You've read in English, but there's a whole French original out there.
Some books are easy to translate. Now, my books are not easy to translate because there's a lot of humor, a play on words, puns, double entendres. There are so many different things in the book. So, those books are not easy. Some books are very linear and very easy to translate. But I think in general, I mean, say my books, I still do not have a Sinhala or Tamil translator. If there's somebody out there who
I was going to ask you.
You know, if there's somebody
Why
out
not?
there
It's
who
been a couple of years now.
Yeah, 20 years since Call Petty People came out.
So
Almost.
didn't that ever occur to you that you would want to have your book in Sinhala?
I do, but one of the problems is that the idea we have of translation here is not perfect. Many people's idea of translation is to have a dictionary, to take one word, look up the dictionary, put it down. But actually, if you have a play on words or if you have a joke, you need to find an equivalent joke in Sinhala or Tamil. So, first of all, the translator has to have a sense of humor. That's also not easy to find a translator with a sense of humor, but with a huge knowledge of jokes or word plays in both languages.
Okay.
So it's a difficult process.
So much could be and could not be lost in translation.
Yes.
Now, Ashok's book, The Ceaseless Chatter of Demons, is the first ever Sri Lankan local novel in 60 years to get its French translation and published in France. Ashok, are you happy with the translation?
Yes, very happy. And there's a reason for that.
Did you read the French version of
I did, with difficulty, haltingly, page by page. But because I know the English version is in my head, it was very easy for me to follow. I'm very happy with it because, actually this is the book if anybody wants to see it. I'm very happy with it because although this is the lady who translated it, the actual translation was done by my editor there, a wonderful woman called Marie-Pierre Bay, who, when she saw the official translation, she wasn't happy with it. So she rolled up her sleeves and retranslated it herself. And she translates Julian Barnes and Isaac Bashevis Singer and lots of really great writers. So I was very happy with her.
The French title sounds and feels a lot more tactile than the English title.
Oh, really? Really? Is that so?
L'incessant barrage des démons. It's very...
Yeah, but I think the English has that too. Your ceaseless chatter of demons. There are so many people, when I'm in a book signing and I have my 6 titles, they look at this one, this is the English version, and say, ooh, demons, I don't want that book. So many people just put the book back, they're quite frightened, you know. So it must have that flavor in English as well, I hope, anyway.
Alice Silo is the translator.
Yes, actually, she's the official translator, but Marie-Pierre Bay, who was my editor, all kind of went over it again.
Now, Ashok Ferrey also wears 2 caps, one as a reader and one as a writer. Now, tell me, when you read, how do you first react as a reader, and then how do you first react under your other cap, the writer? Give me two specific answers there.
Yes, the thing is that sadly, very sadly, now that I'm a writer, I can no longer read any book as a reader. It's like the tailor who looks at you and says, that shirt, I know what material it is. It ruins his aesthetic perception of your shirt. So in a similar way, for me, books have been ruined by the fact that I'm a writer. You know, I don't get, as a reader, you get pure enjoyment. It just does something in your brain and it goes to your heart and you're alive. As a writer, sadly, you begin to see the bones underneath the flesh. You think, this is where he's done this. So in chapter 3 now, this is going to come out. Because you have a professional knowledge of the nuts and bolts, so it ruins it, actually ruins it. So it's quite a different thing. But at least for the first 40 years of my life, I was a reader. So the last 20 years I'm a writer.
You enjoyed your reading for the first 40s of your life.
Yeah. Now sadly, I mean, I still get an enjoyment, but it's kind of ruined by the technicalities. You know, it's like a filmmaker, I guess, who looks at a film and they can't really enjoy it because they're watching the other little things going in and out. Yeah.
If you were to single out any contemporary French writer or a writer whose work you've enjoyed reading or been influenced by, who would he or she be? Contemporary.
Interesting. A few years back, I had to moderate a lady called Mélis de Kerangal, who then came to my launch in Paris of L'Insouciant Bavardage, and I have only just read her first book because I read her most recent book, and her first book was this one, Birth of a Bridge. Amazing language. Now you have to remember, I'm reading this in the translation.
Yes.
And the translation is so rich. It's like eating wedding cake or Christmas cake. You know,
as wonderful as that.
Yes, really, it's a tapestry. The words are so unusual. The combinations of words are really unusual. So first of all, it's a brilliant translation.
But Ashok, you're reading English translation.
Yes,
not the French.
Not the French. But bear in mind that a translation is always, in my opinion, only 80%, 70-80% of the original. Even in here, there's a good 10% that is lost in certain jokes that are not translatable, etc. Now, Mélis's writing isn't humorous like mine, but the language, the use of language is so brilliant that I have not read the original, but I can imagine what the original must be like because the translation is so good. So definitely a favorite of mine as a contemporary author.
Anybody listening to you who wants to venture out into writing, any bits of advice?
Yeah.
Is toying with the idea.
I think this is a terrible thing to say, and don't be sad if you hear me say it, but I think the writing has to find you, not you the writing. Do you know, it's something organic that comes out of you. Now, I was a mathematician, I read pure maths at Oxford, so that I was going to be an actuary, which is the most boring subject in the world. Trust me, it's also the best paid profession in the world.
Sure.
You know? So it is a question of money or no money. You know, and I left university, and then I accidentally wandered into the building world. I became a builder. I still am a builder, and then the writing found me at the tender age of 42, Kumar. You know,
young.
Which is pretty damn late for anyone. I should be thinking of Raymond's by now.
Oh no, certainly not.
So the writing has to find you. Now, having said that, there is no harm at all in preparing for it. So you need the machinery. You can't say, I'm going to be a writer, I'm going to write the great novel. That's not how it works. You have to have this organic desire to write. But the tools need to be there. You need to be really brilliant at your use of language. And the only way you get that is by reading other people.
For sure.
Because essentially what you write is what you read 20 years ago. As I said, Camus comes out loud and clear. 20, 30 years later, I'm reading this and thinking, oh my God, this is where that kind of melancholy that I have in my writing, the empty space in the middle, that's where it comes from. You know, it's like walking up to a house and the doorway is dark and you're kind of afraid to walk into that house, and yet you know you must walk in. You know, it's there. And that feeling is always there. But you may not get that in my books, but trust me, it's there as the writer.
My last question. So, take me to Paris. To what degree does Paris stir the aesthetic?
The aesthete in me.
The aesthete in you.
Well, I think the biggest plus point of having a book translated into French is I can pretend I have to go to Paris on official business.
Oh la la.
But in fact, I'm just going to eat and drink and make merry. First of all, architecturally, because as I said, I'm a builder on the one hand, Paris is easily the most beautiful capital city in the world, by far. Capital city. There are lots of smaller cities which are equally beautiful and poetic, but capital cities, it's difficult to make a big city look beautiful, and they've managed it. That's one thing. But when I come back from Paris, I go with an empty suitcase. I come back laden with tins of confit de canard and all sorts of kind of things that, and it really helped because I was there just before COVID, or a little bit before COVID. So I've been lasting with my tins of food up there over this last year. Where when supplies run low, you open a tin of French food.
So as we enjoy Nous, de la lecture, let's hope that COVID leaves us as soon as possible in this year, and let's hope that Ashok can go back to Paris and bring all those confit canard and the foie gras and all that in his suitcases. Thank you so much, Ashok. As always, nice talking to you.
Thank you, Kumar. Thank you.
Allez, bonsoir.